Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is another Shropshire church. This is the Church of St Peter at Monkhopton. Now, this is a Norman building with later additions and alterations, particularly in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and through, of course, into the Victorian era. Outside, it's covered, as we'll see when we go out, in a layer of render. Inside, you can see a little bit more of the history of the building. One of these cases where the Victorians have done funny things. They quite often this Victorian tendency to remove wall plaster, which is not usually very helpful for a variety of reasons. One of which is the wall plaster may in fact have had medieval wall paintings underneath the later whitewash. Also, it tends to make the interior very dark, as here. So we'll have a look around and see what we can see here. So as usual, we start at the back. In this case, it means in the tower. It's not a very big tower, but there is a tower here. The font there doesn't look terribly old. Looks to be a Victorian font, quite a nice one, quite big and chunky. But and also it's not being overly fancy. And in the tower we have a west window, and here we have some Flemish glass panels. We've got at the bottom Christ going to the cross, the Via Dolorosa, crucifixion, descent from the cross, and at the top resurrection. And one thinks it's actually a very good thing that the Bible doesn't even describe the resurrection, but that of course never stopped artists from putting their own spin on things. There's a copy of a painting of St Peter there, of course a painting that has no value other than to the church here. Larger windows, these look like early 19th century perhaps. This is a Norman window which contains armorial glass. Below we have a memorial to Richard Thompson, 4th Baron Wenlock, Colonel commanding 7th Hussars, 1901 to 2, served in the Nile expedition 1884, and in South Africa 1901 to 2, and died 1918. Little brass lectern here, quite a plain building. Obviously the chancel screen, rood screen is Victorian. The pulpit is modern. I suspect it's Thine Lord is the Victory, which, yes, 1939 to 45, I thought it would be. And here we have memorial to Algernon George Lawley, the 5th Baron Wenlock, born 20th December 1857, died 14th of June 1931. Strong, tender, humble, he sought to serve his master in serving his fellow men. Love never faileth. That's a good pulpit. And these, on the whole, this sort of wooden pulpit is what's suitable for a country church like this. Relatively high Anglican. You can see here got what is mistakenly known as an English altar, which is where you've got these four what are called riddle posts with curtains, and what it means is that the minister has to turn his back to the congregation and celebrate in the eastward position. The east window, we've got pictorial stained glass. I am he that liveth and was dead, so Christ in majesty in the middle, and St Peter and St Paul either side, and then the image, the Lamb of God. Organ, 2 manual with pedal board. Another one of these little Norman windows. And here we've got, although this is not Norman carving, it's Norman style, and it's trying to fit in, and that obviously that piscina is Victorian. Now the vestry is in large altar with riddle posts and hangs, new lighting system, other gifts, dedicated by the Lord Bishop of Hereford on 24th of January, the conversion of St Paul, 1938, given in commemoration of the 50th year in the sacred memory of the Vicar, the Very Reverend Henry Erskine Hill, D.D. Prebendary of Hereford Cathedral, Royal Dean of Bridgenorth, formerly Provost of St Andrew's Cathedral, Aberdeen. So that explains where this comes from. And again, sort of simplicity, relative simplicity of the 1930s here, contrasting with how it would have looked even 20 years before. And back end of the screen is relatively open, but it's a screen because fairly Anglo-Catholic tradition here. And so that is the inside. It's a very simple building, not a lot beyond the memorials. Again, you see the splayed door there, and here you've got a window there, which is a sure sign that used to just be the end of the church, and then below you've got the archway that leads into the tower. So that's the inside here at Monkhopton. Obviously Monkhopton, it was owned by the monks at Wenlock. So here we are outside at Monkhopton. It's a really difficult church to photograph the outside of, because literally just behind the camera is a relatively busy road. It's not a main road by any means, but it is a road that's a fair amount of traffic comes up and down. You can see behind me just this little picturesque tower, and again the render on the outside of the church. So let's have a look around the outside. So there we are, that picturesque tower, the render, and all of this is to do with the late 18th, early 19th centuries Georgian type restoration, and the render's recently been restored, repaired. The idea of render, of course, is to protect the actual stonework of the church by having a layer on the outside that can flake off if necessary, and can be relatively easily repaired in a way, obviously, that eroding stonework can't be. Porch, quite straightforward there. You can see these relatively small windows, don't help in terms of letting light into the building. Quite a simple Norman doorway there. You just see what they call the dogtooth moulding over it. We're in the Diocese of Hereford here, because of course Shropshire doesn't have its own cathedral city. There was a proposal that there should be a Shrewsbury Cathedral, but that never really went anywhere. It's a bit of an argument as to which it should be, and it would be interesting if the Abbey had got it, but they decided otherwise, and I suspect that the C of E is rather glad they did now. See the little tower up there. Appears to be growing out of the West End, but as we noticed inside, it's not really, because there's actually a whole structure supporting, which is absolutely necessary if you're putting stonework on top of an existing building. Because otherwise, because you do need to have a proper foundation, proper support for it. As people have found out when they've tried to do without the modern vestry on the north side there. Sort of provision that back in the day it wasn't felt to be needed. I say vestry, that'll be the toilet block, I expect, because they're the actual organ chamber come vestry. You can just see there, that Norman window there, how tiny it is compared to the later ones. Because, of course, as we've noted before, Norman windows are intended to keep the rain out and let the light in, which is a bit of a balancing act, because Norman windows obviously they tend not to have glass in them. Glass is super expensive in those days. So there we have a little tower with its hood mouldings, very much as picturesque stuff there. And there's that other Norman window in the chancel. So that is the outside at Monkhopton, distinguished of course from all the other Hoptons. And so there we have it. Film in frame, and there we have it. St Peter's, Monkhopton. Very plain, very simple church. Building that's still Norman features, and yet outside you wouldn't know what the date was unless you spotted those two little windows. Well, thank you for watching, and enjoyed this, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.